Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over how to build a status of funds. It is a series that we're doing, and we're breaking this down into individual elements. And specifically in this video, we're going to talk about pulling data from different sources into Excel. Now, we've already downloaded the AFAOC's status of funds, and we've also got a copy of the fund status report from PBAS. And if you need help pulling those, we have videos available to you to show you how to pull that data. But in this video, we're going to work with the data that's already been pulled, and we're going to use Excel to reach out and pull that data in. We're going to do a little bit of cleaning of that data, and ultimately we're going to just kind of give you an overview. And this video is going to be broken up into two separate videos, one pulling in AFAOC's Power BI status of funds, and then another video using the PBAS status of funds or fund status report and pulling that in. And you'll see why we break that up, because we want to make these a little bit shorter videos easier to search. But in this one, we're specifically focused on the AFAOC's Power BI status of funds. Now to pull that in, I'm going to go ahead and click on Data, Get Data from a file from an Excel workbook. It's immediately going to bring up a searchable thing, and it's going to search for the information that I've pulled in. Now I've already got my FAOC status of funds out there, so I'm just going to click import. And what Excel is going to do now is it's going to pull up Power Query. Now Power Query works the same in both Excel and Power BI. It's an amazing tool that you can utilize in many different ways, and in Power BI it gives you a little bit more functionality. But here for Excel, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to take from the workbook, and it says that we have a couple of tabs and we have a table. Because we know that the table is where we have our data, and that's what we want, we're going to go ahead and click on it. And here you have the opportunity to load data or transform data. You can take a quick look as well of what your data looks like. Now, I would recommend that you always take a moment to transform your data and just do simple cleanups that help you move this stuff around. So I'm going to click Transform Data. And again, it's going to open up Power Query. So this will give us an opportunity to kind of take a look at Power Query and the options available to us. As it opens up, it should give us on our right our Power Query settings and our applied steps. It's also going to ask us for the name of this, and in this case, it's just labeling it as Table 1. We can make that a little bit easier and name it AFAOC status of funds. And so what is this telling us so far? Well, first, it's applied some steps already. It's gone out and found the source, and it's navigated in that source to a specific thing. And then it went ahead and changed types. Now, what does this mean? First, the source, if you click on it, it should bring up top the DAX formula of where it is. And you can kind of see that we imported a workbook from, and here's the file path to my status of funds that we pulled the data. But it gives you kind of some other information, because when you look at just the workbook, there's some options available. There's a couple of export details. Those are tabs that are on that workbook. And then there's a table, and then there's some query table information. If you want to change this, you could either change the file path up here, or you can click on the little cog, and it should bring up a option that looks similar to what you had before, where you can find the file path. I recommend using this method because it's a little bit easier and it doesn't mess with the DAX formula. We're just going to select OK. From here, the second step was navigation. And again, you can click the little cog and it'll bring up that option again, where we selected table 1. I'm going to click OK. I'm actually going to delete that step that it just did, and then immediately went in and changed types. Now we can read up here what it did. It changed fund to a text type. It changed this main into an integer, 64 characters. and change the limit. So again, it just went through and found a way to describe each of these things. Now, what are these descriptors? If you click on them, you can see that in this case, AB is a text, but we have decimal numbers, currency, whole numbers, percentages, time, date, duration, and binary, true, false options. So you can see these different tabs are being told what kind of information is in this tab. If it is a string of text, both letter and numerical, it's probably going to come up as a text. If you just have numbers, it's going to assume that it's a whole number unless there's decimal places. And as we scroll over, we'll see that. Now this is important because if you're using VLOOKUPs, the type of information that you're providing is going to be critical in how your VLOOKUP works, because you have to match the format types in VLOOKUPs. And we'll get that into that in a future video. But as for now, we're going to just kind of take a look at our information and see if anything stands out to us. Again, this is the AFAOC's status funds. And if you notice right up here, these green bars, this one is kind of odd. There's a red arrow with some bars, and it's saying that it's giving us some errors. Now, there's a couple of things we can do. We can go through and search for those errors and try to figure out what they are, but I can also look at the line of business, and I have never used the line of business category. And because it's giving me some errors, I can just click on it and I can click remove, and it would remove the whole column, or I can come up to the top and click remove column. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Now, if you were watching over here, you notice that it immediately added a step to remove columns. This is beneficial because it will continue to list all your steps, so you have an option to go back and see what steps were removed. Or if you didn't create the Power Query, you can go back and see somebody else's steps that they performed. Moving on, I'm going to kind of scroll over, and we're going to see a couple of things. For example, your object class, or OSC, you can see that it's both a text because it's got alpha and numeric values, but we come across the report date time, and if you notice, it's saying it's April 1st. Now I'm doing this on April 2nd, and I've updated it, and I'll show you what that looks like in the future. But as for right now, we just need to know that it's a date and time stamp. If we continue to scroll over, we start getting into our numbers, and if we notice, some of these are ABC123, which means it is both a whole number and a hex value, but that's for our subsequently available authority. And if we look at some more of these available authorities in whole numbers, but our commitments are currently in decimal numbers. Now, one thing we can do with this is we can go ahead and change these to currency. What that'll do is it will give it if you watch this, 318,000. If I go from whole numbers and then click on currency, it should update it with a 0.00. That helps identify the math used. So if you have a divider or if you have something in there, it should return back with currency numbers, which means 2 decimal places. Again, it's just helping Excel think about the information in a particular way, so that way when it does different functions, it performs it correctly. So we're just going to go ahead and update all those. Now, if you notice as I'm doing this, it's not creating different steps. It's simply doing one change, and it is updating all of those on that one change, but it's recording them up here. Currency and currency. Make sure there's no more. Don't worry about the null values. Those are actually a good thing in this case. But now we've converted all of that to currency, and all of our data is nicely presented in there in the format that we want. Again, there's other things that you might want to do in the future. For example, you might want to pull out your OE, your O band, and separate that out. Or you could separate your period of availability to a beginning and ending fiscal year if you're working with multi-year appropriations. But for the most part, you can kind of leave it as is. In our PBAS video, we're going to talk about more ways to clean this information because the PBAS reports don't come in a nice table like this. So we have to do more cleaning. So with that said, our data is looking pretty good. We have a good list of applied steps. We're going to go ahead and click close and load. What that's going to do is it's going to load our data into the Excel spreadsheet with all of the adjustments that we made in Power Query. Now, one thing I want to show you is if your data was updated. So if I go back out here to my AFAOC, you can see that April 1st was the last update. If I open that up, it should bring up the raw data. When you hear us refer to the raw data, we're referring to the direct download. Now, again, if you open this up daily, it's going to ask you periodically to update your credentials. Do that, it should go out and update the information daily. And this is why I advise using the AFAOC status of funds. If you notice, my time date updated to the 2nd, so I'm going to hit save. Close out of this. When you have your file open and your raw data is saved, all you have to do is click refresh, and it will update that information to the latest file. So when you click refresh, you're telling it to go out and pull the data again from that source. And that gives you the ability to quickly update your status of funds tool. So with that said, I'm going to do a couple cleanup things. First thing I'm going to do is label this table 1. I'm just going to rename this to AFAOC status of funds, SOF. And anytime I'm working with a table, I like to highlight it in red, just so I know which of my tabs are dealing with data more directly to my raw data. So with that said, we'll close out this video, and we will see you in our next video where we're going to talk about PBAS, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth in the cleaning of the data because those reports aren't very pretty looking, and we need to do more cleanup. So we're going to use more Power Query in that.